The big question with the partial is, am I going to see the line on the hood? That's why you want to ask your installer, if you're getting a partial, what kind of coverage are you going to give me? People tell me this stuff's expensive. I tell people it's very valuable. Hey, it's Build Immaculate Paint Protection. Today, let's talk about the difference between the full front end PPF package and the partial front end PPF package. Both the full front end and the partial package is going to have paint protection film. Paint protection film is going to stop all the rocks and the stone chips. Now, the difference between the two is how much coverage we apply to the vehicle. The partial makes great sense for somebody that hasn't bought into the paint protection film technology yet. I get it. For a lot of people, paint protection film is a new technology, even though it was invented around the Vietnam War area. But if you're getting into the first time, you're leery about dropping all that money in, partial front end is a nice way to dip your toes into a paint protection film package. This Tesla's in for the full front end package. So the whole hood is already done. The whole fender's already in. Full front end is great because it's going to cover the whole hood, the whole fender. You don't have to worry about the scratches, you don't have to worry about the stone chips. And then there's not going to be a line, as we'll see when we demonstrate the partial going on there. Some of our clients, they're investing, they've already got the car, they're already investing in paint protection film. So at that level, they're very passionate about the paint on their vehicle. So at that point, once they hear there's a line going on there, they go, no, I don't want that, I want everything covered. So the biggest difference between the partial front end and the full front end, it's got to be the cost, right? So there's way more film involved in the full front end than there's the partial. That's the reason it costs more money. I mean, that's only obvious. You go to the store, you buy a TV. Do you want the 50-inch TV or do you want the 90-inch TV? Well, you know, the 90-inch TV is going to be more than the 50-inch TV. So the same thing applies to the paint protection. Let me explain to you what you're buying when you're getting a partial front end package. And pay attention, because these are the questions you're going to want to ask your PPF installer what they're using if you're buying the partial front end package. I have two different options in the computer cut patterns. I have option one is an 18-inch pattern. 18 inches means it would come off an 18-inch wide roll. So back in my plotter over there, if we had an 18-inch wide roll, we'd use the 18-inch pattern. If we had a 24-inch wide roll, we could use the 24-inch wide roll. Now sometimes what they'll do is they'll say, technically this is a partial at 18 inches, and technically this is also a partial. The difference is we're using obviously less material on the 18-inch pattern, right? So we use less material. We've already alluded to that, the difference between the partial and the full front end, but the difference within the partials is less material, less cost, more profit for the installer. So if you're getting a very low price or a too good to be true price, that's probably what's going on. Either they don't know what they're doing, or they're using an inferior product, or they're taking the shortcuts and they're using the smaller patterns. Now, maybe that's not wrong. Maybe you need a price point and that's what you need to compromise you need to make to get the coverage on your car, or to get your car protected for your budget. Maybe you do need the 18-inch. That's not to say that's bad, but just watch out for it there. At my shop at Immaculate Paint Protection, I always use the 24-inch film just because that gives you more coverage. Let's lift up the 18-inch here first. So we're just using soap and water here. It's a special soap. Let me come over here. I'm gonna lift up the 24-inch. Maybe you can already see this. So we're gonna just put some slip solution on the car. I'm gonna grab the 24-inch first. Here we go. It's transferred over. Now I'm giving these little notches here. So this little notch right here, that's where I want to line it up first. And then this part, this is going to wrap that edge. So once I'm tacked off there, come over here, pull it, stretch it. There we go. Okay, dance around here. Okay, this little notch right there. Okay, that's good. For these Teslas specifically, since I've been in business since 2018. I've done probably hundreds of these Teslas. I've only done 3 Teslas, partial front end. That's just what people are buying. Now, typically if they don't, we will just do a bumper. That's an option too. So if you just want the bumper done, that's a very low cost option for paint protection film. You'd want to get the bumper done at a minimum on a Tesla because the bumper is black plastic. So once you chip off all that paint and you get down to the plastic, a white Tesla, the black plastic starts showing to you. You see that high contrast area? Okay, so that's it. Here's the line. Full hood PPF, partial PPF. There's the line. Does that help? Right through there. So, and there's a line because there's a step in material right through there. So, you know, if it was a budget, if it was partial, you know, if all I could afford was the partial front end, then I would get just a partial. If it was no PPF or partial, I'd still get the PPF. I would settle for the line. Look, I've sold some jobs because guys call me up and they ask me, are you gonna see a line? Yeah, you are gonna see a line. It's not as noticeable going this way, looking into the car. Looking the other way is. Here's the 24-inch fender. We're gonna put that on. We'll get these fingers down. That's just water and alcohol. Not the good kind of alcohol. So the question I always tell people is, look, you're gonna get a rock, okay, so no rock chips here, but what happens, how's the rock gonna stop back here? Yeah, you're gonna get some stone chips back here. And that's where people get kind of bummed out. It's not a once and done decision. We would never do this. We would never put PPF on PPF on PPF. We could, but there's just no reason to. But for the example, I'm gonna show you where the 18-inch would land on top of the 24. Now, I'm sure if you're looking for PPF, you got a nice car, you're a reasonably intelligent person, so you've got this one figured out already, but let me just show you. That's that. Okay, let's get that squeegee down here. Here's the line for the 18. There's a line for the 24. You get more coverage with the 24, which makes sense, right? The 24 is greater than 18. 24-inch roll is wider than an 18. That's why they can go deeper from front to back. But again, that's an important question to ask. That's why you want to ask your installer if you're getting a partial, what kind of coverage are you going to give me? So there's the 18-inch pattern. Here's a 24-inch pattern. That's the 18-inch pattern. That's the 24-inch pattern. That's the full hood, obviously. So full hood, compromise is 24. At a bare minimum, you have the 18-inch pattern. The 18-inch pattern is basically in right where the headlight ends. That's kind of typical on most of these vehicles, but the 24-inch gives you way more coverage on that fender there. So on the fender, you know, rock chips back in this area, probably not. Here, yes, but it'd be uncovered with the partial. That's good. If you have a traditional ICE internal combustion engine, you know, and the mechanics in there working over, you know, his belt buckle, his tool, whatever, could scratch that up. So I do really like the full front end package. It also just looks a lot cleaner on the install. That's my personal preference. If you're at a budget, if it's economic concern, go with the partial front end first. At a minimum, get the bumper done, then step up to the partial. And if you can afford it, go ahead and do the full front end. That's what I would suggest. The big question with the partial is, am I gonna see the line on the hood? And I don't know which way to answer it. Like, truthfully, you're always gonna see the line. I would never tell anybody, oh no, you're not gonna see it, it's invisible. Again, if it's done correctly, if the back end of the paint is factory fresh and not all swirled, all scratched up, then it's hard to notice. But again, if you're getting into the paint protection film, you're probably super passionate about your car, or at that level, you're willing to spend the money. A few $100 extra makes sense to go and get the full front end done. Yes, you will see a line with the partial front end. If it's a high quality film done by a reputable installer that knows what they're doing, it should not be that noticeable. Just check out your installer. If you're watching this, if you find this content valuable, informative, check out our website at immaculatpaintprotection.com. I got a whole lot of information on there. I got a free buyer's guide on paint protection film. Use our website at immaculatpaintprotection.com. to educate yourself on your PPF purchase decision before you go out and spend, a lot of money on this. People tell me this stuff's expensive. I tell people it's very valuable. So go educate yourself. Look at our website. It's a resource, immaculatelypaintprotection.com. Find out the value in the paint protection film. Find out the value in the ceramic coating. Become an educated consumer, and then you can go shopping, and then you'll be armed with the facts. You'll know what questions to ask when you're vetting your paint protection film installer. It's Bill at Immaculate Paint Protection. Like, subscribe, share. We appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next video.